There are two purposes of a currency. Is it a medium of exchange? And is it a storehold of wealth? Those are the basic ingredients. Bitcoin is not an effective medium of exchange by and large. If I have a Bitcoin, I want to go buy things. It's not easy to buy things with the Bitcoin. And in terms of a storehold of wealth more reflects, like gold, more reflects the opposite of what money is doing. Bitcoin has proven itself over the last 10 years. It hasn't been hacked. It's by and large, therefore, worked on an operational basis. It has built a significant following. It is an alternative, in a sense, storehold of wealth. It's like a digital cash. And those are the pluses. Bubbles are financial assets that have imputed value. It's an asset that doesn't have intrinsic value, it has imputed value. It's whatever we think it is. And if you look at some of the bubbles in the past, a great book is Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of the Crowds by McKay, 1845 or something. But he talks about the South Sea bubble, and he talks about the Mississippi bubble and so on. It is when people love it, it's the dot-com bubble and so on. But when you look at Bitcoin, it's a possibility, it's an alternative, because there aren't many such assets. There are not so many assets that might have intrinsic value that can't be messed around. As far as the government allowing it, the history was, banks always used to exist, and then with the Bank of England, they decided that it was in their interest to have a monopoly on banking at a country. And so what we did is every country treasures its monopoly on controlling the supply and demand. They don't want other monies to be operating or competing because things can get out of control. There are two purposes of a currency. Is it a medium of exchange? And is it a storehold of wealth? Those are the basic ingredients. Bitcoin is not an effective medium of exchange by and large. If I have a Bitcoin, I want to go buy things. It's not easy to buy things with the Bitcoin. And in terms of a storehold of wealth more reflects, like gold, more reflects the opposite of what money is doing, right? And so you look at it, it's a storehold of wealth. Bitcoin is it's a speculative bubble, right? Its price is like a greater fool theory in terms of its price. If you say, what is its intrinsic value? If Bitcoin was made into a more effective medium of exchange, and also operated in terms of a storehold of wealth, not of the reflection of that volatility, it would be a viable instrument.
The debt situation that we have in this country, and the zero interest rates, given you're a student of history, what happens next?
There's not enough money to go around, right? We're spending a lot more than we're earning. And we have to do that partially because of this social redistribution, that necessity, and they can't take it all from taxes. And what that means is the printing of money. So it's the mechanics of that. So what you do is you get more money. And so that devalues the value of money. In other words, cash is trash. This is guaranteed. You are not going to have an interest rate that's going to compensate you anywhere for inflation. So you have to look at the cost of the money, right? And so that interest rate, whether it's the bond rate or whether it's the cash rate, certainly, you're not going to get that. And so we have this wonderful sugar high, which is to distribute the checks and so on. But that means everything else goes up in relationship to cash because it's better to borrow cash. That's just mechanics. So we have that dynamic underway. So we produce inflation. But what you do know is that interest rates must be below inflation rates and must be below the nominal growth rate in order to deal with all of that debt in order to finance it, and that depreciates the value of cash and money, so you have to invest it elsewhere. That's the dynamic, right? Well, I think it's worth considering all the alternatives to cash and all the alternatives to some of the financial assets, and so Bitcoin is a possibility, is that a merit? Right. I have a certain amount of money in Bitcoin. It's a small percentage of that which I have in gold, which is a relatively small percentage of what I have in my other asset classes, and so on. And I think that has the merit. It's an amazing accomplishment to have brought it from where that programming occurred to where it is and the test of time. You have El Salvador taking on, and you have India and China getting rid of it, and you have the United States talking about how to regulate it, and it could still be controlled. So that's right. what it looks
and
like. If you're El Salvador and you talk about your alternative monies, it's a different thing. I'm no expert on that. I'm just trying to say that you asked me what my opinion is. Take it for what it's worth. I'm no expert on it. I think diversification values, it matters. I suspect the real question that investors should be asking themselves is how much stuff like that do they have? How much stuff do they have? Do they have gold? Okay, should we be talking about how much you have in gold versus how much you have in Bitcoin? And do you have a diversification in those kinds of things that we might call intrinsic value money? Because we have a fiat monetary system. Well, I think it depends on the time frame, and I think the relevant time frame is the next few years. And I think you have to put things in the context. So there are three big forces that have been at work, and I think you have to understand those. First is the debt money thing. How much debt and money, and what are the repercussions? How does that pass through the economy? What does that mean for markets, inflation, and so on? We're in a different era now. Zero interest rates, produce a lot of debt and monetize it. Second influence, the conflict, internal conflict over wealth, left-right conflict, that conflict. And then the third is the rising of a great power in the form of China, challenging an existing great power and challenging the existing world order. Those three things are coming together at the same time as then we have a pandemic. So I think each one of those is a cycle. What's happening now has not happened before in our lifetimes, but has happened in the 1930 to 45 period. I went back and studied it over 500 years. And so it's that context. So I think if we're talking about anything, we should look at that within that context.
Okay,
It is, to me, a vehicle for speculation that's attracting people in, and it has all the classic ingredients of a bubble, people leveraging themselves up, and it doesn't have that same intrinsic value. Even the privacy value, is suspicious. In other words, it has a purpose to some extent. If you're living in a country and you don't know your currency, whether it's going to be good or not, and you might try to hold that. But that thing you're holding is running around like crazy for reasons that you don't understand. And then, so it's not going to be an effective store holder well. And the privacy will be stress tested. In other words, governments are examining who is operating in their own clever ways of what that, and so you can't even assume that necessarily it's going to be a privacy vehicle. So I don't see the effectiveness of Bitcoin. I could see cyber currencies and so on, but cryptocurrencies. But this is not what we're having. It's a possibility that I think has been captured as a speculative.